we go ahead and get started, I bet Mr. Price can catch up with us, so if you want to go.
All right, well, I don't have much more to say. So, I said that Laura did a great job, of course, addressing the major topics as well as the key goals addressed in this budget. As I go through this, I'm going to give you a summary of each fund, but know that now that you guys have had such a good discussion about this stuff, I'm just going to refer to different things of just because of equipment replacement transfer. You guys will know what we're talking about there. And if you've got a question, please holler out, maybe stop a little bit. But I'm probably just going to refer quickly to the pay package as well as increases in insurance and not go into any kind of depth on that. And then please, of course, further detail, I'm going to give you a summary, but we got lots of detail in these couple hundred pages here, just in case you get bored. But also, feel free, if there's things that still aren't addressed there, give us a call. Let us know what your questions are, and of course, let us know if you've got anything you want to talk about more on Saturday morning. Now, little housekeeping stuff. This book is extremely similar to what you received last year. You see the big two major tabs. The proposed budget is that first major tab, and that's going to be all the stuff that we believe satisfies the city charter in presenting you a proposed budget. Those are page numbered 1 through 23, just straight up page numbers, if you probably already noticed. You'll see in that second section, supplementary information. That's going to be all that data and support that kind of backs up all the stuff that we put in that first section. You got tabs 1 through 10. And please note that the page numbers there, if we refer to a 5-4, that's tab 5, page 4 in there. They're actually numbered that way as well, so that'll help you through. Now, I can refer almost every slide here to an actual page number, if you want me to. I'm going to totally leave that up to y'all because it bounces all around the book as I go through this. So let me know if you want to know the page numbers. If not, I'm probably not going to say them unless you tell me. Okay? Or it's process. Okay? Here you go. So let's get going with some exciting stat information. Let's start with some stats. Keep going real quick. Okay.
What page is that on?
And you'll see the population growth over, you'll see where it's increased in the last 10 years, up 2.5%. And that we want to talk to you about because it kind of goes right into our full-time employees. Loretta mentioned earlier, 10 years ago we had 383 employees, and now we're proposing next year to have 386. So while you've got 10 years ago, we've got an increase in population of 2.5%. Our full-time staff has increased in those 10 years less than 1%. So just kind of
going back to that other slide, I don't want to belabor that point. These are made up numbers.
Point well taken.
They're not. Because you can see we went from 54.2, then we had an audit. We had a census, and we had 51.
Yes.
Now we think we're at 54.2. We'll have a census.
North Central Texas Council of Governments thinks that's where we're at.
But they're wrong.
Okay.
I was counting everybody. It's less than that.
There you go.
Was the 393 actually hired people in that year?
That is the full-time actuals that we had during that year.
There was a bunch of other vacant positions, and we used to count it at 410 and 412.
Yeah.
Well, that actually happened in 2011 when she said that we had those 19 layoffs.
Yeah, back then, we just had the budgeted and actuals. I mean, you could have vacancy when someone left.
A turnover.
Yes. You didn't see all any of that other stuff coming until we laid everybody off, and we kept count of them for a number of years until we finally just gave up and said, they're gone. And we just took them out.
And so to recap, the 380 that we currently have this year to the 386 for next year. Again, this is full-time. Those are the 6 new positions Ms. Sketch talked about earlier. So that's the 3 firefighters, the 1 public works field tech, the athletic coordinator, and then that conversion of the 2 part-times into a full-time. So that's your 6 positions.
Jenny, the 3 firefighters are in for the 12 months? Is that
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay.
They're in job share. So we public works together.
Now, we just showed you this slide at the town hall meeting just last month, right? It was June. No, I guess it was 2 months ago, technically. So this hasn't changed because this refers back to 2015. We told you that average, we've got 1 employee per 144 citizens of Euless, and you see that that is well below the average as well as all the other cities. And if you even count our 6 new employees that we're requesting for next year, that still gets you to 1 employee per 140 citizens. So we're still well below everybody else. And I think it's kind of fun to compare us. If we had the ratio that Hearst has, we would have to request 232 new full-time employees to get that ratio of 1 to 89.
Wow.
But now, many of those cities have departments, you know, for example, like Flower Mound has, they do an entire water treatment plant. I mean, do any of those places have departments that we don't have that skew that?
Well, everybody will have different departments, but Hearst, Bedford, and Euless are very comparable. You know, Grapevine, I guess they have they do have some water treatment, so, Hollyville, they're gonna have pretty much what we have. You know, we have a aquatic park.
Yeah.
Hearst has an aquatic park. Bedford has, so we're all pretty similar.
So they're just kind of spread through all departments, that increase, I mean, there's not some, it's hard to imagine that there's such a difference, or,
But you're also talking about our populations, you know, if you look, Hearst has 430 employees, they have 38,000 citizens, so it's really the ratio. We
Yeah,
have,
you're right.
we have 54,000 citizens with 378 employees.
Now, does that count the employees at Texas Star that are workforce?
It does not count workforce, it counts all the full-times.
So could that be part of, like, for example, at Hearst, I don't know if they do their convention center at workforce or if they pay their own people?
They were contracted, they have recently taken over from the city as the end of 2015. I'm not sure if they had taken that over yet, I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, our full-time employees at ours was only like 11.
Do we know if they're part-time staff, so to speak, as our part-time?
I don't know that we have the date on their part-times, we can certainly get the date.
No, I'm not asking for
And some of our, and some of our part-time staff, we've got, you know, for like the summer help and stuff like that, we have what we estimate to be the numbers, but we need for them to hire whatever it takes to not go over that budget, you know, to satisfy the requirements that we need. So the number of people sometimes gets a little wishy-washy when you come to part-time positions.
And just the aquatic center alone has a gazillion young people.
I suspect they're very similar. They're going to use summer help and young people to do their water parks in the summer also.
And I'm actually going to skip past this one and just go to the sales tax per capita for all funds. It's a little easier to compare here. When you look at everybody in our normal comparison grouping, everybody has 2 cents. Who knows where it's applied in each city? Of course, ours is a full cent to general operations, a 1/4 cent to reduce property taxes, a 1/4 cent to for CCPD, and a 1/2 cent for EDC. So that gets us to our 2 cents. But you see that that's $338 sales tax per capita. But even more interesting, and we'll refer back later, is Grapevine. $54 million in sales tax revenue compared to our $18.3 million.
More than our whole budget.
And we'll refer back to how that helps them in a little bit. We'll also address that. Something we also always compare ourselves to, and Mr. Bynum pointed this out earlier, is the net bonded general obligation debt. You'll see the average for the communities, and you've seen this enough to remember the footnotes talks about taking in and out self-supporting debt. You'll see we've got the city of Euless both ways, so that you can compare to apples on that. But please note that the average debt per capita, $1,630 for the average of the cities. If you look at our total general obligation debt, you've got $34.5 million there, and that's $639 per capita. If you take out our self-supporting debt, and note, our self-supporting debt right here is just golf course debt and the Dr. Pepper Star Center debt. And so that takes us down to $414. Now, if you take out the PID and the TERS, in addition to that, and just look at our tax-supported debt, that's only $248 per capita. So, something else to consider when you're looking at that. So, enough of the stats. Let's talk the actual budget. We're going to review some of the executive summaries here of just our major funds. The general fund, wastewater fund, we'll talk a little bit of debt as the general obligation debt service fund, as well as the car rental fund, some of our major ones. Those executive summaries, As Ms. Mitchell likes to call this, it's your walk-through kind of thing. Every month I present you with the end of the month report that talks about this is this year's budget, this is how we're doing. So let's walk that forward. Let's take those numbers that you're presented every month and let's walk that forward to next year and see what does that actually, what are we projecting? What are the increased revenues? What are the decreases and increases and decreases in expenses? What's that link in between this year's budget and next year's budget? So that's what we're going to be talking about mainly. And we're actually going to start with the water and wastewater fund because a lot of the decisions you make here factor into the general fund. And most, highlighted most, is the 5% general administrative charge that the water wastewater fund sends to the general fund, as well as the 5% that they also send for the franchise fees. We charge all the major franchise utilities in the city 5% of their revenues, or I don't want to say that for electric because we base that on a kilowatt hour charge. That's way too much detail there. But we charge them basically the right to use our streets in production of their business, to be able to do business in our city. And so we have to look at that from the water and wastewater side to see how that flows into the general fund. And yes, it flows, exactly. Next year I'm probably going to change this because I really think we should be looking at what are the water and wastewater expenses, and therefore what revenues do we need to cover that, and then what rates we need to make those revenues. So I may change it up a little bit when you come to see it next year. But for right now, let's start with the revenues. Of course, this year, current revenues for 16 operating revenues is $22.3 million. So what are the changes that we're seeing here? Water services up $870,000. Wastewater services up $168,000, and reclaimed water service up $52,000. And that's an increase, and that's going to be based on the rates we're going to talk about in a few minutes. That's already factored in there. Inspection fees, $15,000 increase. Reconnection fees, $10,000 increase. These are things that we're looking at that we expect to see because of our growth and just because that's what the trend is showing. Sanitation, recycling, and penalties. Some of that's trend increases as well as our contractual. You've already set the sanitation rates as well as the recycling rates for next year, so we've already factored that in for that increase. So overall, the 2017 proposed operating revenues is $23.4 million. That's an increase of 5% over the current year. Use of prior year reserves, that's just anything we've got in reserves, $233,000. And as Loretta mentioned earlier, there was no room available for any new capital or supplemental programs here. All that $233,000 is purely what you approved last year that hasn't been finished, and we don't expect to be finished yet on September 30th. That's going to roll into the new year, just some of those capital projects. They're not big enough to put in the CIP fund, but they're still not finished.
Janine, was there any factor that we used, if there was any, to anticipate the additional revenue from the new meter systems where we're not, you got 20-year-old meters that weren't measuring all the water? I mean, was there a number or a percent we used?
Jackie factored in a 0.5% increase, considering growth as well as to try, because we're not going to be converted for the whole year. Right now, we've only converted about 3,800 meters at this point. It really started off really strong, and it seems to have slowed down a little bit. I know that they had to go back and replace quite a few meter lids and stuff like that we had to get right online. So it slowed down a little bit, so we did consider that, but of course it won't be the whole year on the new system either. So she's got that percentage in there to include a little bit of that as, hopefully reductions in loss, but a little bit of growth as well. So of that $23.5 million in revenues, where does that come from? Water rates, 57% of what we expect. Wastewater is 37% of what we expect for budgeted revenues. You can see all the other areas are quite small compared to those. Other is 2%. Recycling, penalties, reclaimed water, and sanitation, all 1%. So that $23.5 million, that's mainly water and wastewater user charges. All those other ones just make up 7%. So when we're talking about the revenues to cover the expenses, what are we talking about for the expenses? Current year operating expenses, $22.2 million. So what are the changes there? Those first two, salaries and benefits, that's $363,000 for the pay plan as well as for the insurance increase that we talked about. The next two, TRA payments, reclaimed water purchases, that's $500,000 right there. TRA rates is a big portion of it, as well as we just discussed Jackie's little extra consumption, as well as meter readings that will hopefully have more, well, that was more on the revenue side, that we'd have the collections there, increased collections, but still a growth factor here we've got to consider. Transfers, the $157,000, that's for equipment replacements as well as debt service. We've got G&A and franchise fees, and we've just talked about those, 5% each to the general fund for G&A charges, general administrative charges, as well as that franchise fee for the use of the streets. Utility fees, that's $58,000 increase there. A lot of those fees are going to be coming from some permitting stuff that we've got to do with the state, as well as legal fees and credit card. Accepting a credit card is very expensive. We'll probably talk to you more about that later too.
What's our percent, what's our rate that we have to pay?
Oh, it varies. We have a reduced rate because public utilities get a little bit of extra rate, but it depends. Do they have the card there? Do they key in their debit code? You know, we'll have certain fees associated with that. If it's over the phone, that's a different fee.
Well, we get one rate, so to speak, for all the different functions that use credit cards. We don't have to pay, like, Texas Star doesn't have to pay a single standalone rate, and then
Oh, they've all got different rates.
they all have different rates.
Because, yeah, it depends on the merchant services, and to go with that, because while utility billing has, it's got its utility rate, they can't get that out at the rec center. Yeah. So we have different rates all over the city. Other charges, $8,400 is our increase there, and that's just a variety of things, including we expect to see our water rates go up for the actual city facilities. So that's that big part of that amount. So our proposed operating expenses total $23.4 million, and just as on the revenue side, that is a 5% increase from the current year. And there you can see my capital, $233,000 is purely a rollover from the previous year, as we weren't able to afford any capital or supplemental programs.
So what's the maintenance? Is that a negative on an expense?
Yes, it's a reduction of expense from last year.
Reduction of expense, okay.
Yeah, these are just changes, the changes from your current budget.
What drove utilities again?
The utilities and fees, that's going to be our electric that we pay, as well as any gas we pay for our facilities, credit card fees. We've got permitting fees from the state that we have to pay, as well as legal fees had an increase
So
this
the
year.
groundwater conservation fee, we have to pay the state for every 1,000 gallons of water that we produce out of our wells. And they've been raising that. It started at like 3 cents, and I think it's up to like 12 cents.
And when we talk about what it costs us to produce well water, that is the absolute, you can look at a lot of things like electric costs, chemical costs and stuff, but that one is a absolute wild card because they just.
In the state, they wanted to come back to what they can money for wellness.
And it's 3 years ago, there wasn't even a fee.
There wasn't a fee. They created a group and said, this is the groundwater conservation. And if you produce well water, you must pay them a fee. And it started out very, very small, and then they started raising it exponentially. And so, yes, that fee is a fee that we literally have to write a check. And of course, the other fees is you have to have all your water tested regularly. You have to send those tests off, and that's all the testing fees and things like that.
That fee goes to encourage groundwater conservation in the state. Now, if you can tell me what that is.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell them this is underground
I
water.
saw that was.
It's a sizable number that they, but I have no idea where the money goes or what they do with it.
Okay, so let's go on with the operating expenses at $23.5 million. So let's break it down a couple of different ways. First of all, let's look at it by department. You'll see that water production, 33% of the budget expenses goes there. Distribution of that water is 4% of the budget, and wastewater treatment is 19% of the budget. You'll see non-departmental. It's like, goodness, why would that be 37%? Well, that includes your transfers to debt service, the utilities, and service center operations. So you'll see that looks like a big amount for kind of an other account, but there's serious expenses that go out of that area. You'll see the capital. This represents that $1 million annual transfer for infrastructure improvements that we try to do to keep up with the system so that we don't have to issue tons of debt, like Ms. Sketchel talked about earlier. Finance, you'll see we've got 2%, that's the utility building office. GIS is 3%, that's out of information services. What else am I missing? Public Works, 2%, that's engineering and meter reading. That's about it. That covers the 23.5 million. Let's look at it, that 23.5 million another way, by type. Did it click? There we go. Okay. Of this, 45% is water and wastewater costs. That's the biggest portion. That's how much we pay to Trinity River Authority for our water, our wastewater services, that kind of stuff. So that's the biggest portion of this fund. And you'll see when we talk later about the general fund, what a shift that is, because we're actually selling a commodity. It's kind of our cost of goods sold here rather than a service. So that makes up the biggest portion of this budget. Personnel is 20%. General administrative charges and franchise fees, that's 10%. Service center operations is 5%. Infrastructure funding, 5%. Utilities is 6%. That leaves the other for 9%. That kind of helps you see where that money is actually going. And again, that 45%, the biggest portion of it is going to TRA. In fact, 45% of that budget is $10.5 million. And just remember, TRA, that's kind of run quite a bit like a co-op. I remember we've discussed that for years. They project at the beginning of the year which each entity should pay, what they estimate, and then at year end, and what they estimate is that light blue column, that's their budgeted amount for the year. And then at the end of the year, when they get all their fiscal year closed out and all that kind of stuff, then they come back and say, okay, this is really what the rate is, and sometimes they'll bill us, sometimes they'll give us back a rebate, and that's when we put it into that rate stabilization fund. And of course, that's provides that opportunity to allow customers to benefit from any rebates received from TRA. And of course, this is the time of year when we look at that. The schedule's already pointed out that we believe that we've recommended in this budget that you could consider going from 15 cents to 25 cents in the rebate for this upcoming year. We'll talk about that more in a little bit.
That's because the blue line for 16 would be less than the 3.08.
No, well, as I pointed out earlier, looking at that slide, you would not think that we would be entitled to get a rebate, but it's not just, because our actual cost was higher than the budgeted for 2015, but that's not the only factor. The factor is what percent were we of the total system compared to all the other cities, and we were a lesser percentage of the system, so even though the actual cost per 1,000 gallons was higher, we got a refund because we were a smaller portion of the system.
And that's part of it, because we're using the recycle, or reclaimed
Well,
water.
it's not even necessarily what we project, it's when the others miss their projections, and they are a much higher percent of the system than they said they were going to be. We have actually been, sounds like I'm bragging, I'm not, but our Public Works Department has done a very good job of doing good projections, and we've typically been very much in line with our projections. But if the other cities in the group miss it substantially, then if they underestimate, then we get a refund and they have to pay.
Right, but what I'm getting at is, we use a lot of recycling of water. When water restrictions went away, even though our citizens don't use our recycled water, we do for our portions of it. And when the other people had that go away, they started, as I said, everybody would.
That may account for
it.
why they are, yes,
Yeah.
why they're a higher percent, yes.
And as you can see, their projected amount has been less than the actual rate charged in most of the years. And for 2017, TRA is projecting a 20-cent increase. We'll talk about more of that in a little bit. Wastewater, same kind of deal, run very much the same way with that co-op kind of attitude of it. And TRA has underprojected our cost here almost every year as well. And they're projecting a 13-cent increase for 2017. So to cover that $23.5 million in expenses, we need $23.5 million at least in revenues. Revenues are then predicated on these proposed rates, and you'll see those details laid out in your book as well. And specifically, I'll give you the page number here is 3-4, just because it is laid out in 3-4 and 5. Really quite clear, so I think it's very helpful to look at. But as Ms. Sketchel pointed out earlier, we're looking at a base charge increase of $1 for residential customers for those And we'll talk about the increases as well for the larger size meters, but we're just talking residential here, that increased by $1. The volumetric charge of 20 cents per 1,000 gallons, and that's per tier, which is the exact increase that I just told you that TRA is looking at. And again, the rebate for the rate stabilization fund increasing from 15 cents to 25 cents, and that's only for single-family residential up to 15,000 gallons a month. And of course, that helps offset some of the revenue increase, some of the rate increase. Wastewater, as Ms. Sketch pointed out earlier, $1 for all customers, all accounts there on the base, as well as that 13-cent pass-through, basically from TRA. That's what they're proposing, and so that's what we put on there as well. Other water charges, irrigation, commercial multifamily, commercial construction meters, as well as gas wells. All of these are also increasing that 20 cents the TRA is increasing. Reclaimed water, you've got non-boosted up 5 cents from the current amount. The boosted amounts, those are 13 cents for those first 3 tiers and 12 cents for that last tier. We've got the boosted reclaimed water rates for irrigation are based on 89% of the potable water rates. The discounted rate is to encourage the usage of the reclaimed water. The ultimate goal that we're still trying to achieve is 15% spread between reclaimed rates and potable water. Then you'll see also the construction meters down at the bottom, gas well, that's an increase of 17 cents.
We have a count on how many of the apartments now are on the reclaim?
Mr. Parker, will you?
6 with 5 more literally, hopefully in the next 2 months.
Okay, and back to that base monthly charge, I mentioned the residential, those are normally 5/8 of an inch or 3/4 of an inch. That goes up $1 for that base charge, and you'll see proportionately the increase in the size of the meter also increases by 10.3% of their current base, and that's what that dollar is for residential.
What is leadership's vision of the basic meter charge? Is that just to make sure that we are stable, and then any gallons we use is to offset that 23 meters?
The base charge is obviously your most stable portion of your rate. The volume may fluctuate more, but the base charge is obviously going to help you to cover all your fixed costs. Our cost to TRA are also going to fluctuate by what we purchase. If it's a dry year, we purchase more, we're going to pay more. If it's a wet year and people don't water, we're going to pay less. So your volume rate is going to fluctuate, but you have a certain amount of fixed charges, your employees, your insurance, your things that you can't. And so if you are dependent upon volume and selling the water to pay those, you can actually get in trouble. So you don't want to overtax your, we try to strike a balance there, because obviously you want to be sensitive to those that don't use a lot of water and try to keep the base as low as possible, but you do need a very steady stream from your base customers, because as you get up into volume usage, that can be much more volatile. So you're trying to cover your fixed charges somewhat from that base and not be as dependent upon the variable usage.
And your residential is all going to be those low numbers there, all the other stuff's going to be commercial.
Right, all of that right there.
Oh, yeah.
As you get above the 3/4 inch, maybe a 1 inch in
There's some
residential, but
ones.
otherwise it's going to be the commercials, yes.
And as Ms. Sketch pointed out, the big portion of that is the fixed, you know, where you're saying the base, the fixed amount, you want to make sure you get covered. Don't think that all that we pay TRA is volumetric either, because we pay them a lot of debt service that's a fixed amount, so it's not proportionately that way either.
Mr. Biden, you have a question?
On water, our storage capabilities, do we anticipate a need out 5-10 years for the need for additional storage?
At your will, sir.
The water study is not, we not show that we would need additional storage, but I think it's an natural part of revisiting those wells. At each of those well sites is storage tank, either elevated or ground storage. So when we talk about doing that, we're talking about looking at that holistically, so that will take.
What is boosted versus